Hey kids, howdy and welcome. Once again, it is time for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. We are here to talk about July 15th through the 21st. I'm here with Zoe.
Hello.
Yet after a relatively quiet week last week, we have a not very quiet week this week with a couple of important ingresses, a full moon, Mercury starts his shadow. But first, let's start with our weekly question. Now, I've gotten questions like this before, and I've answered them, and this is such a sticking point with trying to get people how to understand how charts work, how transits work, and what it means to have a house lit up in your chart because, say, a new moon is happening in a particular sign, but what happens when the placement of that new moon isn't in the house that is ruled by that sign, but before it. Anyway, hopefully I'll make this a little clearer. Let's start with reading Lisa's question. I have recently started following you and love your view on the heavens and how we interact with the energy. Smiley. Question. I get a little confused by the idea of looking at the house that is ruled by a certain sign versus looking at the visual house a transiting planet, in this case she's talking about the moon, is in. For instance, today the moon is visually transiting my 9th house, but Gemini rules my 10th house. So which house would I expect this new moon energy to show up in? Thanks for any illumination, pun intended. Kindest, I love that. Regards, Lisa. What I liked about answering this question in this way, because this is about the 3rd time that I've answered similar questions, is that if I can use a new moon as the guiding point of what I'm attempting to do, which is to use my words to describe something I want you to visualize. So careful if you're driving. Don't close your eyes if you're driving. Okay. So we'll use Lisa's example of Gemini rules her 10th house. So I'm going to make something up here. Let's just make up that 10 degrees of Gemini is where her 10th house starts. That means 10, 11, 12, 13 through 30 of Gemini is in her 10th house, and the sign of Gemini is on the doorway of her 10th house. So we would say Gemini rules her 10th house. So in any new moon in Gemini, the 10th house is what is lit up in terms of saying or answering the question, what area of my life and consciousness will this new moon be impacting the most? So if it's Gemini ruling your 10th house, Lisa, then a new moon in Gemini, no matter where it falls in the sign of Gemini, is impacting work and career, your 10th house. Let that land, everybody, as an idea. But I've now given you a visual, kids. I've told you that Lisa's 10th house starts at 10 degrees of Gemini. That means if a new moon in Gemini happens at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 degrees of Gemini, it's taking place in her 9th house because 0 through 10 are in her 9th and 10 starts her 10th. So that new moon still lights up her 10th house because that's the house ruled by Gemini. But what we then do with the idea, let's just say that this new moon happens at 5 degrees of Gemini. So it's technically in her 9th house space and at 5 degrees of the sign that the new moon is in. What we're interested in, the 5-degree point, isn't what house is ruled by Gemini. We already know that. It's the 10th house. We've decided that. We put that on the shelf. We don't need to talk about that anymore. Now what we're talking about is a 5-degree new moon is going to be making direct geometrical contact with any planet or point in Lisa's chart that is at 5 degrees or close to it in her chart. So let's just say her Mars is at 2 degrees of Capricorn. Then a 5-degree Gemini new moon is going to be making loose contact in the 150-degree inconjunct to her Mars in Capricorn. So now we have another way of understanding Lisa's new moon. By the way, I'm making all of this up. I don't know Lisa, and I don't know her chart, and I'm making these numbers up because I don't answer questions when people ask very deliberately about their chart. I don't really answer that. So the new moon in Gemini lights up her 10th house as an abstract concept that says work and career is what's dynamic. But then we look at the transit geometry. Now we're not thinking 9th house consciousness just because that's where the degree points are. We're thinking in conjunct to Mars or trining her Neptune or other transits that might be activated because the new moon's at 5 degrees of Gemini. And that's another way of saying, well, this new moon is causing me, using the example of an inconjunct to Mars. Then the new moon is saying, as it lights up her career house, it's saying you might have to, in this intention you set, change the path you're on with regard to a project, because Mars rules projects and the inconjunct is a fork in the road. So when we're looking at the placement of any transiting planet or a lunation in this case that's in the house before the degree point that says what house is ruled by the sign, then we're thinking, what aspect is that degree point new moon making with other planets or points in the chart? But we don't consider the previous house, only the house that's ruled by the sign in question. We have a bit of a bang today energetically with Mars conjunct Uranus hitting today. In some podcasts, I would never even talk about this. It's just a passing transit. It does mean that we got some big energy. Mars moves fairly fast, so this is an energy that would have been impacting, let's just say, the weekend behind us and a couple of days ahead of us, and not much more than that. And it's a bumpy moment. You got the planet of movement, action, the body, physical experiences, decision-making, and like real stuff that happens in the land of form, connecting with the planet that runs with electricity, that shoots, Zeus's lightning bolt, that changes things on a dime, that can be completely unstable. So if Mars is movement and Uranus is the most instability that there is, then yes, you can expect there to be sudden changes, reversals, unexpected events in a potentially pretty big way. One of the reasons why I'm talking about it is because, again, I get so bothered by some of this pop astrology nonsense because you got people out there saying, oh my God, Mars and Uranus, like when this happens, terrible shit happens. And I saw one post that said, harken back to the idea that Mars and Uranus came together when the United States dropped a bomb on Hiroshima. And that is accurate. But you see, if you learn that, if you get exposed to the idea of, okay, the planet of action and the planet of sudden instability can reflect an event like a bomb being dropped like that, then might there be a bomb today? It's like that idea means that you're thinking of astrology as causal.
Right.
That the planets cause things. So Mars is going around saying, hey, how can I fuck things up with Uranus? Hey, I'm here, Uranus. What do you want to do? Who should we drop a bomb on? But the planets don't cause anything. They reflect everything. So in 1945, the planet was at war in an outrageously violent way. And so Mars coming together with Uranus in the summer of 1945 had an atomic bomb be the right reflection for the summer of 1945 based on what's going on in the planet. So this year, with this transit that happens every 2 years like clockwork, not clockwork, but regularly, every 2 years this happens, right? There haven't been atomic bombs every 2 years, right? So the planets don't cause anything. All of us will notice some unexpected shifts and changes that we got to grapple with immediately, both in our personal lives and on the world stage. If we weren't recording this podcast in advance, I'd be speaking into some of the events that might be reflecting it, but we are recording it in advance, so I don't know yet what it's going to bring. But I promise you, it ain't a bomb, and it's going to reflect the current narrative, and you can expect politics and world news to reflect sudden, unexpected stuff.
Great.
But in concomitance with what is happening, not something new. Listen, we got plenty. You know, people are saying, like, when is World War III going to come?
It's happening.
Right. People are saying, when is World War III coming? It's like, it's here. It's just a different form of war. We're thinking it's like World War I and II. It ain't. We're in it. It's proxy wars, and it's technology, and it's... Anyway, don't worry about the karma, kids. This is not going to be any bumpier than any other sort of opportunity to move through an unexpected couple of days. Have at it. Couple of things are happening this week of significance. So let's talk about each of them, all three. And one is with Mercury, one is with Mars, and one is with Venus. So the personal planets are active. So let's start with Mercury, because that's the big news of the month, really, is that Mercury is getting ready to go into his next retrograde cycle. And that starts with his retrograde shadow this week. So Wednesday the 17th, Mercury will get to 22 degrees of Leo. Now, he's going to move into Virgo, turn around and go retrograde on August 5th, come back into Leo to 22 degrees, and then wrap up his third part of the cycle, moving back into Leo towards the end of the retrograde. So first and foremost, the most important thing about this is that from Wednesday on, from Wednesday the 17th through August 5th, Mercury is going to tell you every problem you're going to be grappling with again when he turns around and goes backwards. I call this the brochure of the retrograde cycle, because everything you're going to go through is going to be triggered. So you pay attention to everything that happens in your thought forms, your communication breakdowns, anything problematic or challenging from the neck up. Pay attention to, maybe even journal and keep track of these things, because once Mercury turns around in August, those issues that came up between now and August 5th will likely be part of the backward journey. I'll say, of course, much more about this next month when we're actually in the retrograde cycle. But I love when Mercury retrogrades cross over the threshold between signs, because it means we get to understand the archetypal demand of the retrograde cycle by looking at the signs he's traveling across between. So if Mercury moves into Leo and we get sort of on fire with our, creative expression, we have that leadership potential in our voices with Mercury retrograde in the sign ruled by the sun. And then he moves into Virgo to sort of like get into the details of what do we need to put together? What do we need to heal? What do we need to investigate and organize in our thoughts, Mercury in Virgo, in order that we might be more powerful with our voices, more Leonian, more in leadership and creative expression and sort of gregariousness and extroversion in the voice? right? That's what happens when you mix the two mansions, so that when we're done with the whole retrograde cycle, we've accomplished two things. We've accomplished raising our voices in confident power because we trust that we have leadership to speak into, and the healing that might be needed in order to do that with more power, more gusto, more confidence, and more creative readiness to meet the world with our voices more powerfully. So again, I'll say much more about that next month when Mercury's actually doing the backward journey, but start paying attention to your communication this Wednesday. Then on Saturday, Mars is going to change signs and move into Gemini. When Mars is moving at his regular pace, he spends about 6 weeks or so in a sign. He will go retrograde later in the year as 24 is becoming 2025, and so he will slow down when we get there. But meantime, it spends about 6 weeks in every sign. So Mars in Taurus for the past 6 weeks has allowed us to be a little slower, a little more deliberate with our decision making. You know, Taurus is a sign ruled by Venus. So Mars is a masculine principle planet, but when he's in the sign of form, Taurus invented form, and ruled by Venus, which means it's the one sign in which we love being here in the land of form. You know, Mars is ruled by Aries, so he's on fire in his home sign, but he's not debilitated when he moves from Aries into Taurus. He simply moves slower, more deliberately, and from the heart because Venus rules the sign. With Mars in Gemini, it's all about movement and action and connection and sharing with others to get things done and putting your mental focus into your physical actions. So the positive elements of Mars in Gemini is you can talk yourself and others into things and like get your mental sort of tools in the direction of your physical desires. And that's a very valuable placement for the planet of action. If there's anything challenging, Gemini always has the shadow artifact of, overthinking and monkey mind and too many ideas and not being sort of focused and pointed in what you want, but a little bit too like, I'll try this and I'll try that. So we might be a little scattered, especially in decision-making with Mars in Gemini. And that starts this weekend on the 20th. Then on Sunday, part of the full moon in Capricorn, which I'll talk about next, Sunday is the day that Venus gets to 12 degrees of Leo. Last summer's retrograde was from 28 Leo back to 12. So that means that as of this full moon, we are in Venus territory, relationship territory, that is directly what we worked on last summer. So you might, in fact, take a look at I think it was August. Just think last summer, July and August, Venus was retrograde in Leo. Things shifted in our relationship experience, our relationship to finances and money, because Venus also rules our relationship to money. And just take stock. What have you learned about how you give and receive love? And are you doing that better as a result of having moved through the year that we've just come through? I know I have. I mean, my life is so different, and there were some painful relational healings that I had to go through, and it sort of led me to territory where I now have the true love of my life, my puppy, Empress Penelope. And it is no mistaking that the process that I've been through personally started last summer, and Leo rules animals and pets, and here we are. Venus is back in Leo, back where he was last summer, and my life has been turned upside down by this little pup, but man, the love is yummy. At any rate, take stock of where you're at this year since last year, and also understand that in the full moon in Capricorn that I'm about to talk about, we are releasing things so that we might climb the mountain of our ambitions more powerfully. And the things we're releasing are what we got to learn in the Cancer mansion of what's behind the scenes that I have to drop in order for me to be ready to climb up the mountain of my ambitions and desires. And Venus in this Leo placement, having been through a year of opening and healing in the heart, means we're in a profound moment of readiness with 2 Capricorn full moons in a row to really deeply reach in to our belly and yank out the blockage and the fear and the I'm not enoughness and the I want to stay small because Cancer says I'm safe and protected. We want to release those things so that we have the confidence in our heart that Venus and Leo can bring, so that we can allow this second Capricorn full moon to really do its good work on us, taking away those things that would keep us from being more powerful in the direction of our goals and ambitions. In the wee hours of Sunday, the 21st of July, around 3:19 a.m. Pacific time, the Capricorn moon at the 30th and final degree will stare back at the sun in Cancer at the 30th and final degree, and we have our second full moon in Capricorn in a row.
And is this called the blue moon?
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, Zoe, because it's one of the points of contention that I have with, classical astrology and modern astrology. And things that I think that really ought to be let go of in the world of classical astrology. So, yeah, a blue moon is when there are 2 full moons in a calendar month in a row. Doesn't matter what sign they're in. As long as there are 2 full moon lunations within a calendar month, they call that a blue moon. And if there are 2 new moons in a calendar month, that's called a black moon. Now, I roll my eyes at this because, who fucking cares?
Okay.
The calendar is only 400 years old, and the sun and the moon have been dancing since the beginning of time, and civilization has been looking up at the sun and the moon for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and looking at lunar cycles and creating seasons and farming, all from the movement of the sun and the moon. And then 400 years ago, some stupid-ass calendar got shoved into our experience. It sucks. It doesn't work properly. We got to throw a leap year in there. And then you're going to tell me that it means something? That there are 2 full moons in a stupid fucking calendar that sucks? I don't care. Even if the astrology gods came down and said, Michael, this counts, I'd be like, I don't give a shit. I'm not talking about it. But 2 full moons in a row in the same sign? Now that's amazing. That's an opportunity to go into a single area of your consciousness, do a deep release so that you can have a more powerful, integrated experience in your life, and then have a second chance to go in and do it again. So you go deeper, you do a reset, you go into more release. So that's what's powerful to me about having a second full moon in Capricorn in a row is the sign. So you want to look at the house in your natal chart that is ruled by Capricorn. That's where a double release is sort of going on. Remember the degree point, right? So this full moon is at the 30th degree. That means if you've got any planets or points in your chart in the last couple of degrees of any sign and the first couple of degrees of any sign, this full moon is dialing directly into you. It's also, about the idea that if the sun is got our conscious awareness focused on the Cancer mansion, that's about the past. It's about family dynamics. It's about intergenerational wounds of smallness and unworthiness that we got handed by families of origin that raised us and installed generations of limitation to, and we are the generation that's being asked to heal that generational trauma. That's a beautiful opportunity because a Cancer lunar cycle is about the home, the hearth, the family, the past, your history. And every full moon in Capricorn lets us drop yet one more way that the past limits us. And now we've gotten a second opportunity to do this in a row. The 30th degree piece counts as well because the 30th degree is called anaretic. It's got a name. It's a masterful degree. So the sun at the mastery adoretic degree of Cancer says, I am consciously aware of the past, home, family dynamics, the tendency to hide and be small in life, but it contains the wisdom of all of the mansion of Cancer with the sun at the 30th degree. And the same thing with the moon. Capricorn moon tells us that our unconscious is interested in climbing up that mountain and letting go of what we've been carrying up the mountain that hinders our pace up. But it's masterful because the moon at the 30th degree of Capricorn is holding all of the wisdom of the entire Capricorn mansion with it. Every full moon is an opportunity to release. So if we're releasing in a full moon, it's about things that we're releasing unconsciously. The moon represents our unconscious, so we cannot be consciously aware of what we're releasing. This is why I often include this prayer in a lot of my writing, and when I'm talking about full moons, it's like, I am now ready to release everything, known and unknown, conscious and unconscious, that would hinder me from accomplishing my desires and goals more powerfully and fully. That way, you don't have to know specifically what you're letting go of. You're telling your soul that you want things that you're aware of and things that you're not aware of. Things that you're conscious of and things that you can't be conscious of. And by addressing it that way with prayer, you allow the unconscious to do its work. And with the moon, like less than 1 degree away from Pluto, the lord of the underworld, this full moon has that kind of gravitas and power to create a release at a tremendously deep level, right? So the full moon at 1 degree of Capricorn last month sort of set us on to the surgeon's table. The new moon in Cancer then says, here's what we're operating on: the past, your relationship to home, and hiding. And now this second one is like the surgery. Moon conjunct Pluto says we're cutting deep. The trine between the sun and Neptune, and therefore the sextile between the moon and Neptune, means that we are guided by spirit at this moment like never before. The geometry is precise, and if you've been following me, you know I like that. So you got Capricorn moon, 30th degree, Neptune in Pisces, 30th degree, Cancer, sun in Cancer, 30th degree, all helping the release happen. Every opposition is hard. Any 2 points that oppose each other are creating a tension of reckoning. We must reckon with any 2 energies that oppose each other. And so when a planet divides an opposition up into 2 easier geometries, like a triangle and a sextile, that's called an easy opposition. And in this case, it's Neptune in Pisces that's creating the ease. So talk about that prayer, man. If I say I'm releasing things known and unknown, conscious and unconscious, Neptune says, got it. I got all the unknown factors, and I will cut the cord to anything you need to let go of. So there's powerful release in this full moon because of that. There's a loose T-square between Chiron and the sun and the moon. So that means that the healing process that this full moon is bringing us through is epic. It's absolutely activated, and it might be painful. If you're going through anything that looks like a healing narrative, meaning you're in some pain, you're in some sadness, you're in some investigation of the past, and it's got you feeling some kind of way, this is a full moon that might hurt deeply. In a valuable and important way. If that's the case, kids, I ain't feeling sorry for you. I'm like, do the fucking work.
Hurt like you're gonna cry, or you're just like, so I don't know, something
Well,
more.
great question. And how about the answer being based on whatever narrative you're going through? So
Got
if
it.
it's me, yes, I'm going to cry that whole full moon because I'm a crier and I'm in some elevated depression from long COVID. Somebody who's in a going no contact with their family might have acute pain in something like this. Someone who turns on the news and feels a little extra sad for the chaos that the world is in. So I'm trying to give like different ways of saying it's going to hurt based on what you're already going through.
Got it.
Mercury is going to be trining Chiron in the full moon. And remember that Mercury is in his retrograde shadow. So that means anything that's happening in your communication spaces that feels amplified in the full moon because it's an intense energy and there's a lot of healing possible, and there might be some painful shifts and changes that you go through as a result of the full moon. Also understand that anything that is of a healing nature, painful or not, will be part of Mercury's retrograde because he's touching in positively with Chiron during the full moon as he prepares to turn around next month. So, themes that come up in this full moon that do seem to connect to long-range healing narratives that you're in, you can be fairly confident that your Mercury retrograde cycle will bring anything that's communicative in nature that comes up around the full moon back into your conscious awareness after August 5th when Mercury turns around. Mars in Gemini will still be pretty close to Uranus at 26 degrees of Taurus during the full moon. So that means that there could be, as part of the intensity of the full moon, sudden changes. Full moons bring release and endings. Mars and Uranus near each other could facilitate an ending happening suddenly and out of nowhere. So don't be surprised if something that you were holding on to gets taken away very suddenly, or you suddenly feel clear about letting something go that you recently thought you needed to hold on to. So look for that kind of sudden change. And the last thing I'll say is that there's a kind of lovely sextile that's being held by Jupiter in Gemini and the north node of the moon in Aries, which means that as we go through whatever release and difficulty energetically and emotionally that this full moon brings us through, that what we let go of will help us move further, faster, more powerfully, because the planet of expansion is working well with a point that means our future unfolding. So the image I get here is the full moon is like the rocket letting go of its old gas tank that it no longer needs. And as it drops that payload, the rocket shoots forward more powerfully and faster because it's no longer carrying some extra weight. That's the theme of this full moon, kids. Let some stuff go so you can climb faster and more powerfully up the mountain of your own desires. This full moon helps. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
Okay, so this week we have an email and dream, and just a little warning, there is some saucy content.
Ooh, yeah.
It is an adult dream. Okay.
Okay. If you're listening to this podcast with your children,
yeah, I just wanted
have
to
a
put that in,
consideration. I love it.
Natalia actually starts with that, saying, "It was wild and perverse, so I had to shamelessly share. The dream has
Love
some
it.
central and disturbing violent features. It wasn't a nightmare, but it was memorable." Okay. So her context is in waking life, she's currently working and considering exiting work as a professional dominatrix.
Ah, great.
The dream began with me scrolling through emails I read from potential clients, which could be all over the place. It's not the glamorous part of the job.
I would also imagine it's where you weed out the people you will and won't work with.
Yes. So I scrolled
guessing.
through a long thread of emails from a man whose name keeps changing. He calls himself many different names, and it's confusing and annoying. He works for a website called Dirty Tongues and is trying to book me for a session. I have no idea what his website could possibly be about or what business he would have for me, but I entertain it out of necessity. I feel the need to validate the situation, and I tell a physically attractive but distant male acquaintance, oh, and he's also a legitimate and upstanding client, that what she thinks this Dirty Tongues man has the potential to be. I'm not sure I believe it, even as I say it. The acquaintance and I then change the subject and start talking about park rangers and what a great wholesome job it must be. Way more relaxing. I say that I am seriously considering it as supplemental income. It feels true, but also defeated and sad. This distant acquaintance I am speaking to morphs into a much closer and also attractive male platonic friend I have had in the past. One who is generous with me with his resources and time, but never became a lover. We were lovers in my dream, laying down unclothed, and I hold him in the full circle of my arms while contemplating my future as a broke park ranger. Then the drama happens. I go to use the bathroom, and horror of horrors, I find a dismembered leg in a shiny white thigh-high stripper boot in the sink. This boot is similar to ones that she wears in waking life.
Yeah.
There is bright red blood gleaming on the white platform boot, and I'm freaking out. I don't know where it came from, how this leg dismemberment happened, who the leg belongs to, or who dismembered it. I'm panicking and start to have doubts about my lover. But I can't believe he would do such a thing. He's a really gentle man in real life. I'm in the bathroom, looking at the bloody white shoe and leg, contemplating the gruesome mystery. Then I take a closer look and see that it's a prosthetic leg. My mind is now even more blown, because there is what looks like to be real blood. I walk out of the bathroom to find my friend turned dream lover, and I don't find him. I'm shocked to find that the furniture in the entire cramped and impoverished looking messy living area is covered in fresh blood. I am too shocked and afraid to investigate more closely, and I wake up mystified and disturbed. I'd be so deeply curious and grateful to receive your perspective. She's wondering if this is a threat. Then says, "Thank you so much. She's such a fan."
Oh. Well, thank you, Natalia. Yeah, so I'm going to start with the last piece where Natalia's expressing a fear that this might be a threat.
Yeah.
I get that. I get that completely. I can totally see that in the content of the dream, Natalia. In my world, though, there is no such thing. Like, it just is no such thing. But that's my world. Natalia doesn't live in my world. She lives in her world, right? Similarly, like, this will help maybe drive the point home I'm trying to make, is that there are cultural connections to dreams and dream meaning, many of which I would call superstitious, but that are cultural, where someone comes from another culture. And it's like, if you dream of a yellow bird, your mother-in-law is coming to visit. And who am I to argue with that?
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? So I want to be really clear. If I say there's no such thing as a dream that's a threat that is saying, and Natalia, you're in some danger, something bad is going to happen, because I just don't believe that. And I've been listening to dreams since I was 16 years old, and I'm 60. So that's thousands of dreams. And I've never heard an experience from a dreamer that would have led me to believe that threat dreams are a thing. I just don't think it's a thing. And I can see perfectly what it is. Like, this is Natalia, you're looking to leave work in the world of sex work. And so you've got images about where you may be going to walk next, the prosthetic leg that might be a real leg at first, right? The leg, we go with, well, what do legs do? Legs walk us into another room.
Yeah.
Right? So if she's telling us that there's context from waking life that she's considering leaving work as a dom, and the dream involves a leg, and the leg is limited somehow, then I think that the content around the leg, to me, has to do with her readiness to walk in a new direction and maybe the impact of working in this field that is, sparking her to think of leaving. The dream gets very literal in the beginning. She's doing behavior in the dream that is like her work in waking life. She's scrolling, she's looking for clients, and she comes to one. Right? So that tells us the dream content is literally about what it's like to be in the work that she's in. I think most notably about the people, the population. The name keeps changing. He keeps calling himself different things. Isn't that an interesting image? A man who's the same man over and over again, but calls himself a different name? That's like all the different clients. They're the same man.
Yeah.
So I think that idea of the man client whose name keeps changing is Natalia thinking about all of the men she services in this work, that it's the same kind of relationship, the same kind of person, the same kind of interaction, just with different names. Now, the website that he's offering her, right? There's like a temptation there. Right? It's like, if I stay in the work I'm doing, this dream is saying in that direction, there's something about the dirty tongue.
Yeah.
So if I hold the image of dirty tongue as a dream symbol, I have to move in the direction of thoughts and words that come out of someone's mouth that are not, clean or self-care oriented or somehow otherwise deprecating. So if this man in the dream whose name keeps changing represents the population of the old work, and that his need to get her connected with the Dirty Tongue website, to me, is speaking to Natalia's relationship to the old work she's trying to move away from. It puts a bad taste in her mouth, or it causes thoughts to be spoken, or I'm sort of losing my thread of exactly what I would want to say without her here to ask more sort of leading questions. But do you see where I'm going, though, with this, though? That the idea of this man is representing, for me, an old paradigm Natalia's trying to get away from.
Yeah.
So therefore, the Dirty Tongues website has to connect with psyche around the work that Natalia's looking to get away from. A dom is going to do her most work with her voice and her words. That's where sex like that plays out most powerfully. I mean, there might be physical aspects and behavioral aspects of domination and submission, but it plays out through the words. So again, then think that the Dirty Tongue website is like staying in the old work. So if we start with this figure that's not so yummy, that I'm declaring looks like it's representing her old work, this more attractive, legit client from her waking life comes along, and they start talking. She even uses the word wholesome.
Yeah.
Right? Park ranger suggests a part of her that's more connected to nature.
I thought that part was so interesting.
Well, it's like that they're talking about park rangers means they're talking about the part. Remember, this is all Natalia's dream.
Yeah.
So a park ranger in Natalia's dream is the masculine aspect of her, meaning the part of her that might choose to do or behave in certain ways that honor what is natural, that honor what what the land in her wants, not the mind in, what wants, but like what's coming out of the earth of her. And she uses words like wholesome and relaxing, right? So, and we're not doing moral work here. I'm a total respecter of any kind of sex work. But the wholesome as a kind of reflection of dirty tongue is what I think that this second man is showing. The part of her that she's trying to cultivate is new, that would get her in a more organic relationship with her own self and body, but it also leaves her a little bit sad because she's in a conundrum of what do I do? Where do I move next if I'm going to leave this work? So where the meaning of the dream comes fully together for me is when this new figure morphs into somebody much more efficient as a symbol for a masculine integrative moment that is beautiful. And, he's attractive and there's a generosity there. And they're lovers in the dream and she's holding him and they're contemplating the future. So if that's the case, if they're lovers in the dream, then the dream means she's integrating a new masculine energy, because lovers, sex in dreams is always about integration, pulling two energies together. So she's in that part of the dream, integrating and contemplating her future. Who will I be? What will my future be if I integrate with the part of me that wants to honor what is, true in my heart and what I desire the most right now? We get to the bathroom consciousness, which is the room in the house where we are most like ourselves, where we are comfortable naked and with our poopy smell and our shame. That's the symbolism of bathroom in a dream. And this is where we get this image, I think, of the old walk. So that the white boots and the sexualized imagery of the leg initially, to me, connects to work as a dom, not the organic, wholesome future that Natalia might be moving towards. So that leg is like the walk she used to walk. And she sees that it's bloody because it's changing. It's being cut off. It's being transformed. Her walk is being transformed. And it looks like a sort of horrifying experience at first, until she realizes that walk wasn't hers to begin with. It was fake. It was the prosthetic. It was a walk that doesn't need to be there anymore. Mm. It served its purpose when she needed it, but she ends up in the bathroom where she's in consideration of all of herself, including the shame and the hidden stuff, because that's what happens in the bathroom. That's where she sees that it wasn't organically a leg to begin with. It was a false walk, and she's looking to create a new walk that is more in alignment with nurturing and caring for herself. But it's a difficult transition, and it's obviously filled with lots of feeling and lots of processing. And the dream is reflecting all of that as well.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.